Man, if there's one thing that Bungie do very well, it is cinematics and trailers. Check this out. That's Marathon's latest cinematic kind of teaser for runner shells in the game. They posted one last week as well for the Assassin. And Bungie have said, we see your theory crafting our release schedule, and while we do have cinematics in the works for all of the shells, not all of them will be coming before launch, as their team's got their hands full with other stuff. Thanks for being patient, can't wait to share more. So we probably are going to see at least a handful of these before we get to launch. And probably the next most big piece of news will be information about the open playtest weekend for Marathon. As if you have any doubts as to whether you're going to enjoy the game, well, that'll be a very telling moment, won't it? So I'll keep you posted when we get details about that. But going back a little bit, the Marathon dev team did a bunch of interviews, where of course they speak about the new IP, but also Destiny players, and the relationship between the two franchises. And of course this comes in an interesting time where we're seeing a lot of news articles and outlets at the minute talking about the fact that, of course, Marathon is coming, but Destiny feels like it's been sidelined a little bit at the moment, as Bungie aren't really speaking about it in any detail. I'm sure we're going to hear more very soon. But as far as what Bungie have said about both of the games, this is from a Ryan Gilliam article last year. Marathon may be made for PvP fans, but Bungie says there's still plenty for the rest of us. And they highlight that they are not trying to turn Marathon into Destiny 3. So Ryan Gilliam asked Joe Ziegler, the director for Marathon, how do you think about introducing something that's going to be quite unfamiliar for a lot of people who aren't Tarkov sickos? What is the process of bringing the Bungie audience into Marathon while also attracting a new group of players? And Joe Ziegler said, I think it really depends on how we cut up the Bungie audience when we think about it, right? Because in a lot of ways, when we think about the experience we're creating, it's a very PvE and PvP focused game, and the difficulty is, in some games, those things are opt-in or opt-out, but in this game, you can't opt out of the PvP experience, and so if you're a player who enjoys Bungie games but doesn't like PvP, it probably isn't the game for you, to be fair. But if you're a Bungie player who also enjoys PvP games, especially sandbox survival games or even sandbox PvP, you'll probably really enjoy this. That's interesting word in there. It's also, given that this interview was actually a few months ago, interesting that the devs probably wouldn't use those words right at this point in time because they want to get as many pre-orders as they can. But he went on to say, also, it's about understanding that we're not looking to take Marathon and just say, this is now Destiny 3, and then shift that over. We're looking at the future of Destiny 2 and trying to figure out what works with players and how that's going to evolve and change. But we're also kind of carving something to live besides it for another set of players, which is really focused on PvP and the sandbox survival experience. Just to tap in with my experiences of Marathon, I played a little bit of it in the first alpha, and so I'm confident the game has changed quite a bit since then, but while I don't play a lot of pure PvP at this point, multiplayer shooters and arena shooters, PvP in general, is kind of where I come from, especially before Destiny. And while Marathon certainly has PvP, and that's really the biggest threat component of it, my experience of it was definitely more that it's a kind of survival experience. And to call it a PvP game is kind of a stretch because it is very much PvE VP. It just so happens that the other players are the ones most likely to mess your run up, right, or cause you to lose loot. So I guess it depends on your perspective. But where Ziegler had also spoke about Destiny, he said, I think part of it is that we don't expect Marathon to become D3, as he mentioned. He said that our goal is to not basically make a new product that replaces Destiny 2, and we believe that D2 has a future, and the team working on it has been working really hard to understand what players' needs are. But if you like Destiny, and you happen to like a lot of PvP experiences, then Marathon could be something exciting for you. He also commented about Destiny players potentially having a certain advantage in Marathon, since the weapon systems tend to be a little bit similar, but equally, there's just enough change where I think you're going to have to relearn some of that curve as well. But again, he commented, it doesn't necessarily mean that every Destiny fan is going to adore Marathon and everything that it has to offer. And he had used the phrase that if you're a Destiny player who's not interested in PvP at all, maybe it's not the game for you because there's going to be PvP interactions that occur, and at some point, someone else who is a player is going to come across you and shoot you. Again, suggesting if you're only looking for PvE experiences, definitely Marathon won't be the game for you. And like I said, I think it's safe to say that it is a mix. But in connection to that, Joe Ziegler had said, I don't know if our game is only for the sweats. I actually totally agree though. though, when we think about PvP versus PvE, it's more about saying that if you're completely against ever having a PvP interaction, it's probably not your game. But if you're okay with PvP and enjoy the other elements of it, we're really driving that as well. And I think that some of it is, we do have a contract system that exists inside of the game. I think for those players who are focusing a bit more on how do we generate the right kind of new user experience, there is a kind of solo tutorial component built into Marathon, and that actually sort of helps you learn the basics. But we also have the contracts in game that actually help you kind of step ladder into understanding how to complete and accomplish goals. And I'd say the kind of seasonal progression, contracts, the codex, even things like titles which will be earnable in Marathon, are going to form the kind of core endgame or actual progression loop for a lot of players. Although some of that will be impacted by seasonal resets. So, as Ryan Gilliam had pointed out, seasonal resets have been controversial in some extraction games. And after years of running a live service with Destiny, he asks what have Bungie learned in terms of managing the live content model. Ziegler points out, obviously, the two games are different, but Destiny's really about this idea that I'm always growing more and more powerful by moving a number forward, getting better gear, getting better weaponry and that sort of thing. And that's a big part of the appeal of the experience. Whereas for Marathon, what we're aspiring to really achieve is to sort of have a continuous survival engine that changes its form all the time. So season to season, you shouldn't just be experiencing the exact same thing at a new time, but experiencing a different way to level, a different way to experience new content in that journey as you go along. He points out they want to make each season feel like its own experience, but also have ways to commemorate past achievements and previous seasons. So earning things that you can keep on an account level, whether it's cosmetic oriented, or things like titles, which we know will feature in Marathon, that will form the kind of longer form progression aside from the seasonal resets. And in terms of what will actually reset in Marathon, Joe Ziegler had suggested that these will happen around every 3 months, so we're probably looking at 3-month seasons in the game. And we know one of the components that we'll actually earn by progressing contracts and factions will be the base stats for runners. So as we can see here, that includes things like heat capacity, agility, looting speed, melee damage, various recovery stats and more. And we'll be able to boost those stats with some of the upgrades on a seasonal basis. It made me laugh because one of the devs said, in the Vidoc, those boosts will be permanent for the rest of the season. Which of course is a variation of permanence, but not necessarily. Anyway, while there have been a couple of nuggets of info there about seasonal resets in Marathon and how Bungie are kind of thinking about the game, it's also interesting to see how they contextualize that around Destiny players and what types of Destiny players may interact with Marathon. So that's the bulk of what we have to discuss today, but like I said, Bungie have also promised a roadmap for Marathon before the launch, so that's coming at some point in the next 3 weeks, and there is the open playtest weekend, which I think is totally worth checking out for all players of Destiny, whether you're excited for Marathon or not. I guess if you're absolutely no interest, then maybe there's no point, but if you're on the fence, that's definitely something worth looking at. And while when pre-orders actually dropped for Marathon, it was really promising for that first few days, we saw quite a decent number of pre-orders in terms of charts. The next biggest indication of how Marathon's actually going to go down with players in general is going to be the open playtest, so that's a huge moment coming up very soon. And if you want to stay up to date with the news, updates, that roadmap and the timing for open playtest and release, I will keep you posted. So keep it locked and loaded here on the channel. Share your thoughts as always on the relationship between the two different IPs that Bungie are now managing and the implications of Marathon on Destiny as well. That's been a big conversation and it's totally understandable. In a perfect world, we'll get both and both will do well, but the next couple of months is going to make a lot more sense of that, so we'll see how it goes. If you've enjoyed the video, a rating would really help us out as well. Otherwise, I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.